Welcome, everybody. I'm thrilled you're here today for today's conversation about something that can transform your business, having the right number two leader. I'm Alec Broadfoot, CEO and visionary of Vision Spark, where we help entrepreneurial companies find and hire the right number two leaders so that you can scale your business and create more impact. Today's guest is Diane Mentzer of her firm's name is Diane Integrates. I absolutely love that name, Diane. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
how'd you
you.
come up with that name?
Well, when I started my business, my thought had been to be a fractional integrator. And it's like, well, that's what I do. Diane Integrates makes sense. People know what it means. And then I started down that path and realized that what I really wanted to do was help integrators like me so they could help more businesses because we expand the reach and just make a bigger difference in the world that way. But it's still integrating, operating system best practices and everything and helping them integrate. So I felt like it still held true. So I didn't try to mess with it. I like it.
That's awesome. That's great. So tell us a little about your firm and what you guys do for your clients.
Yeah. Well, I'm a solopreneur, so it is me. And I love that. It's fun being out here on this adventure. And what I do is I help business owners and their second in commands work more effectively together, but I'm really providing a lot of hands-on support for that person in the second in command role to help them communicate more effectively with their visionary, to have somebody that they can workshop ideas with and work through things, because the visionary wants to be able to hand things off and forget about it and not have to be sucked into conversations, especially about lots of details. And I love talking about details. So let's just, dive in and get into it. And so I provide that type of support. I also run a peer group for people in that second in command role. And for that, we do small group working sessions so that everybody gets to know each other really well, and they always have time to talk about their issues. So no more than 4 people in a cohort. I have 3 people in my first cohort, and that's going awesome. And I'm getting ready to open up. Well, I've just opened up registration for the second one. So I'm recruiting, and I work really hard at putting together groups of people that are going to enjoy working together, not have any competition within the group, and really be able to help each other grow. And it's just so fun to be a part of that. And to help business owners make sure they're getting the right support from their number 2, and that they have the right number 2, which you are always a huge part of finding that perfect fit. But as you know from your work, what they need to do first is figure out what they want to do and what their role is going to be, because they have to be very clear on what they want to do so they can get the right support and get that, and people know, what's expected, what they're doing, how they're involved. So I help people, business owners, like unload their workload, like kind of go through that, start to craft what their role looks like, figure out what it makes sense to delegate, sort of helping them before they get to the stage with you where they're really going to hire that COO or heavy hitter, but they're usually leaning on somebody within the business already. So it's helping to make that more effective.
And you have an experience being an integrator. I read that you helped double sales for a company within 3 years. Tell us how you did that.
Yeah, that was a really amazing experience. So we self-implemented, which I don't recommend. We definitely should have worked with an implementer and probably would have gotten there faster. So I was the integrator, and we got introduced to it and started integrating the aspects of it right away. We're focusing on the L10 meetings, the accountability chart, which was huge, that role clarity. And we really went deep. We did a little bit deeper than what they talk about in the book Traction, to really clearly define everybody's role, to start seeing, or clearly define what everybody was doing. Because, you look at the accountability chart, it's like, let's look at it functionally, look at it by role. But it's really hard to separate out the people from the roles, especially when you're so used to thinking of your company in terms of people. So we started looking at, what is everybody doing? And then what role does that fit into? And through that, I've developed this really cool the Unload Your Workload spreadsheet, or role clarity spreadsheet, same one, where you really use that to see and start breaking down what roles are people filling, how does that look when we're going to start to grow. So it allowed us to really get a real handle on what people were doing, look at the company from a functional perspective. And it actually, during the conversations with people and working through this, found out that one person who was filling a couple of roles, we all thought she really liked one part of the job, but she really loved the other part of the job and was kind of interested in getting rid of some things. So it allowed us to shift work around a little bit, make sure everybody was primarily working in their sweet spot. We all have to do things that, aren't in our sweet spot, but the people were primarily in that place. And really was able to, it improved flow, it improved efficiency, and then the communication also got better through the team meetings where we were talking about rocks and, tracking those and doing the to-dos and switching to that L10 type of meeting. We used 90 to help us keep track of everything, to figure out our scorecard, and it helped us shift to focus on things that were moving the needle. And it was government contracting, so a lot of it, has to do with winning those bids and being on the right vehicles. And I helped write, a couple of those proposals and get us on the right vehicles. But it really was awesome to see the growth that happened over those years and get us to that point where we were just in a much better place and able to, not only were we in a better place financially, but we were better utilizing all the members of the team. And people were happier, people were clear on what success looked like for them. The quarterly conversations really helped keep everybody in touch. We started getting more input from the team and more perspective from them. It improved our proposal process because we were getting more input. We strengthened other processes and procedures going through it. So it really, all those foundational aspects of running a business, that tightening those up and getting those running smoothly frees you to be able to do so much more.
And during that time, it sounds like you guys did so much work. I mean, did you sleep during that time? Did you work a lot of hours, 100-hour weeks, or was it pretty balanced?
It was not pretty balanced. So we started in 2019, and that was moderately balanced. And then it was COVID, and there was no place to go and nothing to do, so it actually, timing worked well for the company because, working the extra hours and the longer days, it wasn't like I was missing out on dinner with friends or not going on trips and stuff, because we just weren't. And, but yeah, I got to the end of 2020 and I was like, I don't want to work that many hours ever again. I also took the Integrator Masterclass in 2020, which was amazing. It was the first virtual cohort, but I really liked that because it was spread out over a series of weeks. So that you really got to learn something, implement it, have the IDS sessions. I loved the virtual format for that. And I've really, plus we were cohort 007, so that's always cool. But I was really happy to be part of that at that time. But yeah, it was a lot. And I think having an implementer would have helped us probably focus on the right things first, would have helped with relieve some of the stress. Their business owner or CEO would have had that coach that was really in her corner, helping her with it. So yeah, we got through it and we did a lot of amazing things. I think having an implementer would have really helped with us getting through it probably a little smoother.
And in talking with you a couple weeks ago, you shared with me a little bit about your passion in helping visionaries and integrators really have good communication, and how important that is. And oftentimes, visionaries aren't the best communicator. I always joke that no one's ever accused me of over communicating. It's not one of my strengths, but my integrator, he's a phenomenal communicator. So, but tell us a little bit about some of those strategies that you advise to improve communication between the visionary and the integrator.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Alec. And you're right. I mean, there's multiple levels of that communication, because there's communication between you two, there's communication out, how are things happening? And I don't even see it as good or bad. It's just, a lot of it's different. Like, you really speak different languages. And it's funny, my master's was in being the liaison between business teams and tech teams, because the business team will go to a tech team and say, build me something that does this. And they come back and they say, okay, here it is, it does this. And 6 weeks later they go, okay, now make it do this. And they're like, we can't, because you didn't say you wanted it to be able to do that. It's kind of the same thing with the visionary and the integrator, is that, the integrator or visionary will come in with big ideas and kind of share some information and is ready to move on. And the integrator is going, I have a million questions. And you start firing those off. And then a lot of times the visionary will feel attacked and they're like, why do I even bother sharing these great ideas with you? You're just going to shoot them down. And you're like, wait, I'm not shooting them down. I'm just trying to understand. And because they don't even realize that they speak differently, are frustrating each other without any intent to frustrate each other. And so helping them understand that a little bit, but then also strategies, mainly for the integrator to use when communicating with the visionary, because that's our job, is to make things as easy as possible for the visionary. So when they come in by with an idea and they're ready to drop the idea and keep moving, it's to frame the questions and say, okay, I hear you've got this amazing idea. Is it okay if I ask you some questions now? Because I want to make sure that I really understand it. Coming from that place of curiosity and being truly curious about what their idea is, and then how can you make it happen? When they understand that you're asking questions from that space, then it's like, oh, you want me to tell you about all these cool things in my head? Okay, let me tell you about them, and much more likely to open up and share more ideas, because we and I do this too. We all kind of think that people know what's inside our heads, which of course they don't. So that's one way, of being strategic, framing the conversations, and then when you're asking the questions, really genuinely curious. It also helps to come up with some filters, so for ideas that you can work through together, so that you as the integrator aren't always shooting ideas down. It's like, okay, we have a filter. We agreed this is the filter for ideas. Let's look at how does it line up. Okay, this goes on for later or maybe someday. And also understanding too the level of urgency, because visionaries are great at delivering everything with lots of enthusiasm. And sometimes it's an idea that this is super important to me and I want you to get on it right away. And sometimes it's like, oh, I thought about this, walking from the car to the front door, and, maybe someday explore it, but they'll be delivered with the same level of enthusiasm. So you don't always know, is this a drop everything, or is this put it on the list, we'll talk about it at some point. So kind of developing some communication norms and being both in agreement with how you're going to do that. So then nobody is seen as attacking the other person or shutting them down. And then another big part of it is what, from EOS, this presenting that united front. And if you are going to disagree and get into something, to do it privately, because your tone carries over. And if people see you clashing, people start to take sides, and that can really cause a lot of problems.
That is so important to be united front, for sure. And I love how you kind of left the door open for more ideas from the visionary. I think that's really important in building that relationship. Just the visionary has freedom to share ideas. It builds trust. It builds that relationship, and the integrator is not always saying no, 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 right? It's like, tell me more. And sometimes I do that with my integrator. And he's really good at saying, okay, Alec, we're implementing your last big idea, and it's going well. And if we bring in this new idea, then, how are we going to allocate the resources to effectively execute it? And then where do you think this goes from a timing standpoint? And so asking those questions is a little bit better than, saying, no, this can't work, or this can't happen, or stop coming with ideas, because that you're kind of shutting the visionary down. That's what gives them energy, right? Is these ideas. Right. And they think about it at night and weekends and, on their commute and at their kids' games, and they love ideas, talking with other entrepreneurs. And, it can really demoralize them if it's too often as no is said, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and I love what what you said about you and John get to work together through those. And that is something too, especially for people who are coming up from within the company into that integrator role, is understanding you have to look at things a little bit differently now. And yes, you're still responsible for integrate, but you have to start to adapt and learn how to have some of that vision so that the decisions you're making about what to implement are what's best for the company, not what's best for your schedule or what's best for what you have planned out or how you had seen, because you have to put the company first. And like these ideas, and that's why when you have some filters, that helps you both like look at it together and say, okay, yeah, this passes our test, or it doesn't pass our test, or it's on the fence, let's wait. But like you said, we're in the middle of implementing this one, it would impact resources, then you can say, okay, yeah, makes sense. Let's put that, for like a maybe next quarter thing or something like that. But when you're a thought partner, you can be that thought partner for your visionary. It amplifies everything because you look at things from different angles. And so you're bringing more solutions and more insights to each challenge, each opportunity, each idea that you're discussing, and shutting that down from both ends, like even when a visionary is like, you're too negative, I don't want to hear what you have to say. Well, then you're all of a sudden you're tying one hand behind your back because your solutions aren't going to be as strong. You need to be able to look at it and have somebody that's willing to point out and go, hey, we're not thinking about this, so that you can fix it before it's out in the world. So it's, kind of like understanding the balance and why it's so important to, communicate and work together.
so in your experience as an integrator, or even as, helping companies with integration, what has been your biggest mistake?
My biggest personal mistake was early on not fully appreciating the value that the visionary brought. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about it, because I did shut her down sometimes, and sometimes intentionally, hate to admit that, sometimes not intentionally, but I've been also studying brain science communication sort of for fun. And some of the strategies that I learned with that really helped me understand the information from rocket fuel better, or how to operationalize what was in rocket fuel. So when I started learning about like framing the questions and how you put people on the defensive, and nobody's at their best when they're on their defensive, and things like that, really helped me see the value of making that relationship work. And the rocket fuel book and traction helped me. It reminded me, like, yeah, you need somebody that's willing to take these risks. Visionaries, entrepreneurs take huge risks. You're carrying a lot of weight on your shoulders. And when we're too stuck down in our own integrator world, we forget that. I think, or I forgot it, and I know some others have as well. Like you forget that, hey, this person's out there taking a lot of risks. And yes, sometimes it drives you crazy that they've got 27 ideas every week, but one of those is going to land and it's going to make a big difference for the company. And if you aren't considering them thoughtfully and being genuinely curious about them, then you're going to miss out, and that's not in the best interest of the company. I think also that disagree in private. I think sometimes there was times where I was in meetings and we would kind of start getting into something sensitive, and instead of just sort of tabling it myself and going, okay, I'm going to bring this up in our next same page, just kind of getting into it, and it makes people really uncomfortable, and it really hurts the team morale. So I think those are some of the mistakes that I've made, and I've seen others make as well.
When did you realize you were an integrator, or had the gifts and talents to be an integrator? Because that's not something that someone wakes up and decides to do every day. And in our research and interviewing thousands of candidates, we found about 3.5% of individuals have the ingredients of what it takes to be an integrator. So how did you make that conclusion that that's something that you want to do?
It's really kind of funny. And I have taken your assessment. I remember I did the assessment on myself and it said, yes, you are an integrator. So that was wonderful confirmation for me. It's something I've done all my life without knowing it was a thing. And like my mom tells a story, she was working for a nonprofit and they were doing a mailing, and I was like in junior high, 13 years old or something, brings me and my friends in, we're stuffing envelopes and I'm looking around the room. And at one point I just made everybody stop. These are all like adult employees of the business, made everybody stop, rearranged how things were getting done so it would be more efficient. And then we, finished up the mailing and left. And I read Traction. Our visionary brought, suggested we read it and see what we think. And I read Traction. I was like, oh my gosh, there's a name for what I am. I didn't know, there was a name for it. So, and that's why too, like, it's like, I think there are a lot of people like me who have these skills, don't even really realize that they're special, and they're, working in this role without being fully equipped, and they could just make such a bigger difference if they were.
Yeah, very good. So in terms of like a cadence of when you meet with your client, the visionary, or when other integrators meet with their visionaries, what do you see working in terms of a cadence of meetings? Once a
For
week?
like the same page meeting?
Yeah, same page.
To stay in sync, or same page is EOS terminology, but whatever that regular meeting is to stay in sync. For me, visionaries move so fast. I think weekly is the best cadence. I also don't think you should start there, because asking a visionary to all of a sudden dedicate an hour or even half an hour on a regular, it's just like not what they want to do. And so what I recommend to my clients and people that I talk to that are in this kind of world is start small. Get 15 minutes of their drive time. They're already, they're driving, they can chat with you about stuff. Also keep it focused on them and their ideas. And then if you really find that you need to dig deep into tactical details, set up a separate meeting for that, but kind of keeping the same page meeting really about, are we on the same page? Do I understand where you're going, where you want us to go? And, how does that align with what I'm seeing? Are there things we need to talk about? But keeping it sort of at that same page level, and then setting up different time if you need to really get them to focus on something or be sharing a screen or whatever, but keeping that one. So starting with like 15 minutes of drive time and sticking to that, even if it feels like it's great, like, nope, I agree. I said I'd only take 15 minutes, and then, start building up when they're ready, when they're going, we always end our calls short. I think we need to spend more time, and checking in too with each other to make sure, is this the right cadence? Maybe get to half an hour every week, then maybe it's like you have shorter check-ins some week and longer check-ins. Some people might want to do half hour every other week, an hour on the alternating weeks, to make sure you're getting through everything. But I think don't stay for an hour because you say you're going to stay for an hour. Let what you're doing, just like the L10 or other meetings that are focused on solutioning and challenging, like, let your work drive the length of the meeting. So if you've got an hour block but you're done in 20 minutes, be done in 20 minutes. Give each other the time back, but make sure that you've done a little bit of that digging deeper. I can't, but and I think that also falls a little bit on the integrator to ask those and what else questions, and what else are you thinking about, to draw out the ideas from the visionary, to dig a little bit deeper into what they're seeing as challenges or opportunities, why something matters, being curious and not just taking what you hear and then on to the next, or really helping them uncover, because in that way you really get at what's at the root of things, what's at the heart of things, so that you can focus on what matters most.
And let's talk a little bit about visionaries. They're in multiple seats. They're pulling their hair out. They're working super late hours. They're sacrificing sleep. They're sacrificing time with their family, and they can only think that the way to move the business forward is to work harder, longer, sell more. What would you say to an integrator in that predicament, or I'm sorry, a visionary in that predicament?
Yeah, I would. One of my kind of things is when you're saying I don't have time, that's a red flag because you're stretched too thin. And I use Unload Your Workload tool. It's a spreadsheet version of Delegate and Elevate from EOS, or the 4 quadrants, whatever term you use. But I take it deeper to deal with also energy level associated with it. So really start documenting what you're doing. And I like to use a spreadsheet so you can sort, but just start tracking. Like, how are you really spending your time? Where are you spending your time? And then when you look at that after like 2 weeks, what's not getting done? Add that in, and then start to look at what roles do each of these tasks fall under to help you see that. And then thinking about your energy level, do you like it or hate it? Some other things like that, because that way it lets you see, where you're spending a lot of your time. And when you look at it on paper, it's like, yeah, that's really not the best use of my time. But in your head, that's not maybe what's taking up so much of your time. So seeing it, everybody that I've done that process with, from leadership team members, business owners, everybody sees value even in that first phase, because it just helps you get a grip on what you're really dealing with and how you're really spending your time, to then see what makes sense. And when you start looking at, wow, I'm spending my time on stuff that's not that important to the success of the company, and I hate it and it sucks the life out of me, well, that's, okay, we need to fix that. And if you're not comfortable yet letting go of something completely, maybe you're still leveling up your team, or you aren't sure who you want to hand off to, but seeing what roles different things fall under, that helps too. But then you can look at, can I delegate a big portion of this? How can I break it out? What are phases or steps to get at least the majority off your plate, even if you're still holding on to some ownership? And then as you get comfortable with that delegation muscle and letting go and realizing, yeah, they may not do it exactly the same way in terms of the process, but the outcome is what you wanted, it makes it a little bit easier to start to say, oh, okay, I can let go of some of these things. I remember the first time I heard, if somebody can do it 70% as good as you should delegate it. And I'm like, what? 70%? That's a C. I don't do C quality work. But, like, if you don't make sure that you're focused on what matters most, it doesn't matter how good the quality of the work is if it's not what really matters in terms of moving the business forward. And recognizing that there's value in different ways of doing things, there's value in different styles, and as long as people understand what needs to be accomplished, why, and that's communication comes into that too, like why it's important, they understand the vision, if there are certain things that you want done a certain way, like kind of understanding the why behind it, then you can also get their input and figure it out and just keep things moving. But I think that starts with taking a look, and then also thinking about, what do you want your life to look like in a few years? And is doing what you're doing now going to really get you there? And when you start thinking about it that way, and that's something that I think talking to a coach or a colleague or a peer, not somebody necessarily within your company, that's super helpful for the visionary to start thinking about, like, what do I want my life to look like? What matters to me? And, when you're working with a coach or a peer group or something, you can kind of dig into that a little bit more. But I think that also starts to shine some light on what needs to come off your plate.
Yeah. I know for me, my own journey, we've been working with companies running on EOS for 10 years now. And we placed a lot of full-time integrators, and I saw the transformation they made in our clients. And I always had this self-limiting belief that Vision Spark at the time, my company was too small to have a full-time integrator. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I, I just, did some self-reflection and I said, what would I grade myself? I was in three seats. I was in the visionary seat, I was in the integrator seat, and I was in the head of finance seat, right? And I'm like, what would I give myself as a visionary right now? Like, what would be the letter grade? And I gave
Mm-hmm.
myself a D as a visionary, a D as an integrator, and a B minus as a CFO. And that was really telling to me, like, I'm really doing miserably in my role, right? If I had a boss, I would probably be fired, right? So I did some of that, and then I explored looking at a fractional integrator. I reached out to a couple of them, and I really wanted someone here in Columbus, and I was striking out in terms of our pool of fractional integrators here in Columbus. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to hire a full-time integrator. And it was the best decision I ever made. John joined our team 3.5 years ago, and totally has transformed my business. We have I'm trying to think of a revenue, but I think our revenue since John joined, we more than doubled our revenue in 3.5 years. And so it's been an absolute game changer. I've gained quality of life and better relationships, and of course the team is running better, and the structure and performance and profit is a lot higher. I always tell visionaries, don't believe that you can't afford this person, right? Because
Right.
oftentimes we're like, well, my profit is this is what I take out of the company. If I pay the integrator this, then I'm going to take out less. Can I do that? And within 6 months, you're going to get that value back of what you paid them. Within a year, a good integrator will be 2-3 times what you pay them, and within a couple of years it'll be 5 times what you pay them in terms of value, and you couldn't afford to lose them, right? So yeah, so that's kind of my own journey uh, um, in that role of trying to find an integrator for me. Now we have we
I'm
have
curious, though, I'm curious, what made you decide to look at yourself and grade yourself that way? Like, what was it that you saw, or what prompted you to, because that's really, I mean, most people would not think of doing it. That's so cool that you decided to
Yeah,
do that.
I think it was multiple things. One is we had some dysfunction on our team, and we really didn't have great leaders in place. I had
Mhm.
a operations leader and a sales leader, and they were not great at what they were doing, and I was really not happy with our numbers. And my favorite quote is from John Maxwell. You can teach what you know, but you replicate who you are. And so I'm like, okay, who am I right now, you know,
Mhm.
as a leader in these areas? And I was not where I wanted to be. So that's what changed it for me. And the other thing too is I had a mentor years ago, like when I first started Vision Spark. He said to me, Alec, if you were an investor if you were an investor, would you invest in your own business?
Mm.
And would you bet on yourself, right? And
Mhm.
and I'm like, yeah, heck yeah, right? So I'm like, I'm gonna bet on myself that this decision is gonna be a good decision, and it is, it
Yeah,
is, right?
that's
So yeah.
awesome.
Now there are visionary entrepreneurs that don't yet have an integrator. They don't even have a fractional integrator. So let's talk about when would someone want to hire a fractional integrator and when they would want to hire a full-time integrator. So
Yeah.
tell us what you're thinking, what your thought process is when you're advising clients full-time versus fractional.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it makes sense to start with fractional. Um, it's for a lot of reasons. But even before they hire fractional, I think it makes a lot of sense for them to have figured out some delegation, start raising up a number two from within your company. Like, you have that person that you're leaning on, whether it's an office manager or project manager, there's a vice president, a director, something like that, where there's still going to be some of that daily day-to-day stuff that you don't really want to pay strategic COO rates to get that stuff done. And if you as the visionary haven't started letting go of some of that, you're going to bring in a fractional COO or a full-time COO, and you're not going to get your money's worth, or it's going to take a long time for you to start. Because, and I know one company, they went through 3 integrators in like less than a year, because they bring somebody in and the guy's like, you're too bossy, I don't want to be told what to do, or I don't trust, and you're paying for experience and high quality people, and then you bring them in and it's like, I feel threatened. Not everybody would, but this person obviously felt threatened and wasn't ready. So I'd say, first off, make sure that you're ready to have that thought partner, that you want to be talking about ideas with somebody more than who you already have on your team. Like, you're ready for a next level strategy. So delegating stuff, thinking about your role, having a feel for where your company is functionally, like clarifying roles within the business. So when this person comes in, you're giving them something to work with, rather than having to spend their time trying to figure out this stuff that they're going to need to figure out before they can help you grow. So figure out your roles and responsibilities, get clear on your role, have somebody that you're handing some operational stuff off to. Starting with a fractional helps in a couple ways. You get to sort of figure out what you like, don't like. You get a little bit of that. And as you know, it takes months, if not a year, right, to find that really right full-time person. And that's not something you want to rush or take a chance with. And if you've got somebody fractionally that's filling the seat, it's getting your team used to having a COO, it's getting you used to having a COO, and then by the time you're bringing that full-time person on, you're much more prepared for that relationship to be a success. And I think it makes it, when you bring that person on, it has to do with your business growth. If you've got a fractional and you're seeing the growth that you want to see, stick with that fractional until you start bumping up against, okay, I want to do more. To do more, I need more of their time. They don't have more time for me. Okay, maybe I better start, and keep talking to them, because they're going to know too when you're starting to be ready. Like, you're starting to need somebody full time. We better start planning for that, because it's going to take a while. And then that gives both of you lead time to transition to having a full-time. It gives you fractional time to transition to finding somebody to replace that engagement. So it works well for everybody when you can plan.
Yeah.
Planning's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very good. And I really like your thinking process, especially for those companies that are not yet ready for a full-time. Hire a fractional, and it's easy to bring them on quicker. You have that 1099 relationship or that vendor relationship, so it's a little bit more of an on-off switch.
Mm-hmm.
And then we always advise clients that are ready, that if your leadership team needs a full-time integrator, then that's usually a good sign to bring one in.
Yeah.
A pretty complex leadership team. Or if they have someone like you in place and they're wanting you more of your time, if they're wanting you 2-3 days a week, it probably makes economic sense to bring in a full-time person.
Yeah.
And our process is usually about 90 to 120 days to find that right integrator. And we take your time and vetting hundreds of candidates to make sure it is the right fit, because fit is everything when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to finding the right person. And how that integrator and visionary, what are their interactions like? What's their chemistry? What are the values synced up? What are the leadership capabilities of that full-time integrator? And we look at 5 different ways that they're vetted through that to make sure that it's a good fit. So I feel bad for your client that went through 3 full-time integrators before they hired you. I can't imagine that pain of that visionary, the money, the morale. That type of client should have hired you first. So those are some of the things that we look at from a financial sense or economic sense, size of business, capability. Maybe they need a little bit more industry experience, something like
Mhm.
that. So, what are your typical engagements with your clients? Is it 6 months, a year, 18 months? What is your typical engagement?
Yeah, so I think probably 6 months would be the minimum. So far, most of my clients have been with me. Well, like we're like working towards a year. I had some that were with me for one. My first one graduated after about 15 months. Um, you'll start to see changes, start to see improvements right away. And I'm not integrated. I'm supporting their internal people. You'll start to see improvements right away because just clarifying the roles for the top two leaders, all of a sudden you get more time back. I mean, that's a big thing for visionaries too. Like you start to get your role clarified, you get time back in how you want to spend it with family, other stuff for the business. So they'll start seeing benefits right away. A year to 18 months, if they're going through like the full ops success blueprint, is where we're integrating the different aspects of business operating systems. It's not an EOS implementation. It's like getting them ready for that, but
Mhm.
really getting that clarity. It takes some time to get that clarity around roles and responsibilities, test it out, make sure you got things right, start thinking about KPIs, doing stuff like that. So I'd say anywhere from 6 to 18 months probably makes sense. Um, and it just really depends on the business. And if it's, if things are going and they're rolling and they're ready for that next phase and they get through stuff quickly, a lot of it depends too on how much they're putting into it. So with that type of relationship, it's because it's not just fractional me coming in and filling a seat. I'm getting them ready for their next big thing. That it can vary in terms of length of time. And when I think about the peer groups, those are people. Nobody's locked into a year, but I like people to think about in terms of a year because you're building relationships and people are counting on you. And a big value of the peer group is the other peers that are going to be there in that conversation with you. So my first peer group's coming up on a year in June, and I'm getting ready to start the next cohort with that. And then like the unload your workload experiences, like individual projects, those take a few weeks because there's the pre-work where the business owner, or I'm doing it right now with the leadership team, which is really exciting. We've gone through, everybody spent 2 weeks documenting what they're doing. We went through it, worked through, looked at the different variables, and now we're getting ready to do an in-person meeting where we all come together and help the leadership team define how they interact a little bit better. And those are like a 1 month engagement.
Yeah, that's great. And those of you that are with us, you're welcome to put some questions in the chat for either Diane or me. Diane, one of the things that I see at times, either it's with companies that have not yet hired us,
Mm-hmm.
or even sometimes it happens when they have hired us, find number two, is that there is what I call the integrator breakdown. And what happens a lot of times is that the leadership team is so used to going to the visionary with things, with questions, with assignments, with feedback. And that visionary is also so used to going to the team. And so when now you have this new person in place, whether it's you as a fractional or it's a full-time number two, and now it's a disruption. I'm sorry, I misquoted. We call it the integrator disruption. Now it's a disruption. Now there are behaviors that have to be changed. There are communication patterns have to be changed. Is that something that you've experienced?
Yeah, and I think that's pretty typical. And changing habits is hard, but really, if everyone's on board with why it's going to be better, and it's really important for the top two leaders to push back when people come to them for the wrong things instead of jumping in, and really training them, helping them understand why it matters, because they have to deliver that consistent message from the top so that the people who are coming to them with questions break their habits of just going to who they know will give them the answer that they want. And so it's the top two leaders have to be in sync with, yes, these are our roles and we're going to stick to it. We're going to live with these. And if they start to feel like it's not the right fit, then, like maybe something is like, people keep coming to me with this and I feel like I really should answer it. And, then maybe we need to revisit that division and make sure we assigned it right. Is there something that we didn't think about when we first did it? And that's partly too why I like doing the accountability chart in layers, because what you do at the top affects the people below. And so if you do everything all at once, then you start to live it, you might have a lot of changes down the, it's like, oh no, we're going to change this, we're going to change that. So do it for the top 2 leaders, let them live that for a little while. Do the rest of the leadership team, let them live that for a while, and keep working down so that you're not adding to the confusion by saying, oh, we want you to do it this way. Nope, we're changing it. Come to me. Nope, we're changing it. Go back to him. Because then nobody's going to know who to go to for what. And the whole purpose is to make that clear. But when you sort of put it out there and have a document or something that you share with people, like here are the divisions, here is who you go to for what, it makes it a little bit easier. So I think documenting that role clarity and going through a process like that makes it easier for you to stand by it, and it makes it easier for people to understand what it is.
Yeah, and I think that visionary has to commit, and say,
Yes.
okay, this is how I'm going to communicate. Everything's going to go through the integrator. And then he or she needs to communicate to the leadership team that, hey, this is the new communication pattern. So you go directly to the integrator, and the first 30, 90 days is going to be pretty tough, and there'll be some issues, but the more you can commit to it, the more you can, if there's an end run, it's like, oh, my bad, I should have went through you, Diane, or I should have went through my full-time integrator, and the more that visionary can acknowledge of the mistakes, the quicker that's going to change, right? So
Yeah.
I wrote an article on this a few years ago called "The Integrator Disruption," and talked about the communication channel. So that's on our blog there. So
Cool. Yeah, I'll check that out. I read your book, which I loved. I was like, oh my gosh, I just love it. It's so cool to see a visionary who really gets it and is helping other visionaries and integrators really get it. I mean, that's just so awesome that you're able to do that and explain it in a way that makes sense to visionaries. Because I think that's a challenge that integrators often have, is we don't explain things in a way that makes sense to visionaries.
So when you're working with clients, what are some of the problems that you don't want to deal with?
Well, because I'm in that coaching advising role, I don't think that really comes into play a whole lot, because I'm not a fractional integrator, so I'm not taking that seat. So I'm there to help them with whatever challenge they're dealing with. Ultimately, they're going to have to go do it. So if it's a sticky employee situation, yeah, I will help you talk through it. We can come up with ideas. If it's if you're trying to document a process, or you're trying to define a process and you're getting stuck, we'll brainstorm it. I can give you some resources. I can review a document. I don't mind, like looking at things and giving feedback and stuff like that. But I guess I'm not taking rocks, and I'm not going to take a project on and do it unless it really made sense and we talked. But in general, I'm not taking the projects and doing them. I'm helping you do. I'm helping the integrator do them. I'm helping the visionary, define their role and be in that place and what they want from their life, and then checking in. Are we on track? Are you getting what you need out of your integrator, or probably not at full integrator yet, but your second in command, or is this person providing you the support you need? But I'm not really like taking on, I'm not taking on rocks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I think that's a really good point, because one of the reasons why I hired a full-time integrator is because I didn't want to deal with employee issues. I was horrible at LMA and holding people accountable, and I'm a people pleaser. I love creating vision and culture and big relationships. But man, when it came time to holding people accountable and having stark conversations. I didn't want to deal with that. And one of my ahas came, it was about a year after I hired John and we did that delegate and elevate. And I wrote down the things that I don't like and not good at, customer problems, employee issues, and there's a few other things. And when I looked at John's, the things that he loved to deal with were customer issues, employee issues, all the things. I'm like, I knew I hired the right person. So for some reason, the chat is disabled, but I had a question. What is the name of the book called? So it's called Hiring the Right Number Two Leader. It's on Amazon, and it's also available on Audible too. So if you're like me and you love the Audible versions, it's now available on Audible. So
Do you read it? Do you read it on Audible? Or did
no,
you
I
have
listened to it. Yeah, I listened
No,
to
no, I
it.
mean, did you read your book for Audible or did you have
I
somebody else?
did. I did read it. Yeah, I didn't want
That's
to read
so
it.
cool. I
Yeah.
love it when authors read their own books because with your inflections and your tone, I mean, you convey so much more than the words on the page. I think if somebody else reads it, some of that's lost because they're just dealing with the words on the page, but your emotion and your, I just know that comes through. I read it. I didn't listen to it. So now I might have to go listen to it.
Yeah, I got some coaching from a friend of mine, Kerry Oberbrunner, and he said you need to read your book, Alec. And I'm like, well, I don't have the best voice for that. He's like, no, the audience wants to hear from you. So you make a very good point there. So Diane, have you written a book or ever thought about writing a book?
I'm working on a book. It doesn't have a title yet, but it is really about its strategy. First off, it's seeing that doing it all as a visionary to hiring a full-time COO is a journey, not a leap. So taking the time to get those steps, figure out what you want, get used to, build your delegation muscle with people get started, go that whole flow, and then strategies for making those relationships work along the way. So getting into the communication piece of it, the meeting cadence, how to do these things to get the most out of your, so I think toying with something about activating the superpower, because that relationship, it's not that the integrator is the visionary superpower, it's that their relationship, the way they work together, is the superpower. And so something about activating that superpower. And just like any other muscles or skills, like you have to learn how to walk, right? You have to learn how to activate this superpower, and it's not going to be something that you just snap your fingers and are able to do. It's something that you're going to learn how to do.
I absolutely love that. I think that's absolutely fascinating that the superpower is the relationship between the visionary and integrator. That's the superpower, right? It's not the visionary superpower and the integrator superpower. It's them together and their complementary skills. That's the superpower.
Yeah.
Yes, that is really good. We had Kelly Knight on last week on our series here, and she really talked about her relationship with Mark O'Donnell. And I can see, like, even I'm looking at them and looking at my own relationship with my integrator, you're absolutely spot on. That is the superpower, is the relationship between the visionary and integrator. I love it. Make sure you trademark that.
Okay.
Yeah. What other questions do we have from the audience? I have a couple more. I don't know if that chat was enabled here. I'm in a panelist mode, so I can't really see the questions here. Let's talk about trust. And I have found that clients that have an integrator right now, maybe they promoted somebody within, or maybe they've hired a friend or someone they know, but they have a tendency to, I don't want to say micromanage, but they really can't let go. And I'll often ask, do you trust them? Do you trust their capability? And sometimes they don't. It could be they don't trust them because they just can't let go. That's who they are they're a control freak, or they've promoted the wrong person to the role or hired the wrong person. And, when I compare that to our clients that we've placed these number two in, where they they have absolute trust in that number two's role and their company's taken off. I have absolute trust in John, my number two, where I can leave the country and go on a vacation, which I've done a couple times, or I can take a short sabbatical and not worry about the business. So, Diane, what's your opinion of how important trust plays in that relationship?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that trust is essential, and you can use communication to help build that trust. I think if they've got some, and the person that they have probably is not going to be their ultimately right person to grow the business to super heights.
Mhm.
That's probably, that's often true when you've brought somebody up from within. Um, but it doesn't mean that they can't be a great help to you. But you do have to be able to trust them. And sometimes it's like, well, they were just the manager. How can I trust them to be the second in command? Because when you brought somebody up, maybe you're not fully letting go of what they used to be and recognizing what they are, or have they really had the chance to prove themselves? Because if were instructions clear? How are things delegated? There's lots of things that play into things that break trust that aren't either person's really fault. They're just part of like what happens. But communicating, like being really clear on roles and responsibilities, clear about the vision for the company, where you're going, what the core values are, um, working, defining actions that exhibit the core values, like what are behaviors that are related to the core values, so that you can put those into your accountability charts or put those into your job description, so that they know that living the core values is part of being, accountable in the job. So there's different things that you work in to help build that trust. Sometimes it's not the right person because and I know I heard you talk about this too, like you hire somebody like you. So like a visionary, if they're starting to lean on somebody that's like them, the other person is not going to be the right fit for that. They still might be a right fit for something in the company, but they're not the right fit for that because you've got now two idea people and still no detail person, right? So how, kind of looking at that, working genius is like my favorite assessment. I love how user friendly it is and how it really makes it clear and easy to see the different layers and things like that. I like having them do the rocket fuel assessment to see where do they align on these visionary integrator things, but always coming from it as a place of people have good intentions, people want to do a good job. You've got quality people that have helped you get this far. So not looking at it, like starting from that place and then figuring out what do we need to fix? Is it fixable? What is the fix? What does that look like? And really, and is this person really interested in being the more? Because I think sometimes people say yes because they care about the person or they want to say yes, but is it really what they want to do? So getting into that as well.
Yeah, and one of my questions I ask my clients is that if you're thinking ahead in the business, if you go ahead 2, 3 years in time, is this person the leader at that time? Can they help take your business to the next level?
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine had someone in the sales seat, and he was really confused if he should keep her on the team. And we were at lunch, and he's like, "I thought of everything." And I said, let's say his name's Tony. Tony, can this person take your team to the next level? And he's like, "No, absolutely not. That's exactly what I needed to hear, Alec." And he ended up letting her go. And so, I think that's always a good question. So, well, we are out of time. Diane, thank you so
Went
much.
so fast.
I know it did go fast. So thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. And if you're interested in Diane's assessment or her services, Her website's Diane Integrates. And thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, we'll see you again.
Yeah.